Test.
Good evening. My name is Larry Norman, and I am chairman of the Billerica Democratic Town Committee. To start this evening, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like first to thank the candidates for the 4th Middlesex State Senate seat, Cindy Friedman, Representative Sean Garballey, and Mary Ann Stewart, for taking the time from their busy schedules to be here with us tonight. I would also like to thank the members of our media panel, Nick Greenhall of the Billerica Minuteman and Tom Zuper from the Lowell Sun. Ted Panos from WCAP was scheduled to be here with us this evening, but came down with a case of laryngitis, but he did send us questions so that his spirit would be with us. Also, BATV, I'd like to thank them for airing and allowing the other districts in the access to the show this evening, and Neil Harrington and Pierre Elaine for producing and directing tonight's event. Also, a large thank you to the members of my Democratic Town Committee who worked to put this forum together. And finally, to the audience that is here tonight and watching on BATV, thank you for taking the time on this gorgeous night to view this. I would like to introduce our timekeeper, former Selectman Ellen Rawlings. Hey. The moderator for tonight's forum is Steve O'Leary, a lifetime member of the Democratic State Committee, former town moderator, and current selectman in North Reading. Mr. O'Leary will now go over the rules of the debate.
Thank you, Larry. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I also want to congratulate the candidates, and from a timing standpoint, I'm sure you're very happy that your entire summer won't be spoiled by a campaign, because it's going to be over in mid-July, or by the end of July. But first thing I'd like to do is ask everybody to silence their phones. If you haven't already, I would appreciate that very much. Each candidate will be allowed a 3-minute opening statement. With 30 seconds left, the timekeeper, Ellen over here, the official timekeeper, will show a yellow card for the candidates, which will indicate 30 seconds. When time is expired, the timekeeper will show a red card. A candidate that has a question directed to him or her directly will have 2 minutes to answer the question. The other 2 candidates will have 1 minute to respond to the question if they choose. Again, same thing with the 30 seconds left, you'll be warned as far as the timing. A general question to all of the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes each for the questions. Again, you'll be indicated when the 30 seconds are up. Questions will be chosen in the order from the media questions, email questions. We have a series of questions that were emailed to the town committee prior to this evening. And again, we're encouraging audience participation. We have a microphone right at the center here. If you wish to be recognized and ask a question directly of the candidates, we encourage you to do so. If you're a little bit camera shy and don't want to come up, Chairman Larry Norman has index cards for you. You can write the questions down, give it back to Larry. Larry will hand it up to me, and I'll be happy to ask the question on your behalf. Again, finally, each candidate will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement. What we did prior to starting the proceeds here is we drew lots and to determine the order of the opening statements. And the order for opening statements will be Cindy Friedman will be first, Sean Garballey will be second, and Mary Ann Stewart will be third. So with that, I'd like to open it up and start with Cindy.
Turn this on. Thank you. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Larry. Thank you to the Billerica Democratic Town Committee, and to Sean and Mary Ann for waging into this, and also to the audience and to you for coming out and being engaged. I never expected to be in this position. Never saw myself as a candidate. I've gone down different paths in my life. I was a public school teacher in elementary school for 6 years. I was a manager of hardware and software groups, engineering groups, building products, and I was the chief of staff to Senator Donnelly for 9 years, and now I'm a first-time candidate. I loved my job with the senator, and I am running because of my commitment to him and my commitment to the work we did together. The wonderful thing, or one of the wonderful things about Ken, was that he allowed me to be a partner with him. And we shared a set of values that drove our legislative agenda. And what we both believed is that everyone should be able to get a good job and have access to training to get that job, to put a roof over their head, to have economic security, to have access to good, affordable health care, to feel safe in their communities, and to be respected for their differences. I'm running to continue fighting for those values and making the state and the 4th Middlesex a place where everyone can thrive. I believe in the power of a senator to make a difference. I bring a great deal of legislative experience to this seat. I've written and filed legislation. I've advocated for that legislation. I brought both the advocates and opposition to hash out their differences. I've worked with senators and staff to move legislation, and I've helped Senator Donnelly advocate for what he's working on the floor of the Senate. But I also have done other things. I've worked with both constituents and town officials across this district. I have helped a grandmother navigate Mass Health to get access to a doctor for her grandchild, and I've helped with funding for the Billerica High School. I've helped a family get mental health services that were denied to their son when he was in need, and I've dealt with MassDOT on the funding for the Middlesex 3 project. I am a problem solver, not a politician. I work on big and small problems. All of those are equally important. This is work that really matters, and I want to continue to do it as the senator for the 4th Middlesex. I hope that tonight I can earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Next candidate to speak will be Representative Sean Garballey.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Larry, and to the Billerica Democratic Town Committee. Thank you to the Billerica Minuteman and the Lowell Sun. And thank you to Cindy and Marianne for being great candidates in trying to become our next state senator here in the 4th Middlesex District. Ken Donnelly was one of my closest friends in the legislature. We worked side by side, and I know that if I'm elected, I'll be able to hit the ground running and continue his incredible legacy and the work that he did on behalf of the people here in Billerica. It has been the honor of my life to serve the people of Arlington in the House of Representatives for the past 9 years. I have been proud to write, file, and pass legislation on behalf of so many throughout the Commonwealth. I've been proud of the alliances I've built in the House and in the Senate, and I believe I'm in a unique experienced position to become your next state senator and to be the voice of the wonderful people of Billerica. Some of the pieces of legislation that I have filed and passed include the 50-50 legislation, which was the biggest investment in public higher education in the past 30 years. And by doing that, we kept fees and tuition flat for 2 years. I proudly filed and passed the legislation mandating that insurance companies would have to cover the cost of hearing aids for children. I'm proud of the work I've done and the legislation I filed known as the Social Worker Safety Law, which was the first in the nation law protecting our social workers here in the Commonwealth. The legislation I filed and passed with help in the House and in the Senate to establish online voter registration. As the chair of the MBTA caucus in the House, I worked and led the effort in preventing service cuts, successfully lowering the cost of the ride, and establishing more funding for regional transit authorities across the state, here in Lowell as well. In my work on increasing local aid to cities and towns throughout the 4th Middlesex District, but also the Commonwealth, whether it be Chapter 70 for education, Chapter 90 for our roads, and unrestricted general government aid. working on issues around veterans and supporting our veterans across the Commonwealth, and working to pass increased funding for children in foster care, people with developmental disabilities, or people on the verge of homelessness, increasing the appropriation for the MRVP, which allowed money for the homeless. I believe I can hit the ground running as your state senator, and I'm honored, and I hope to earn your vote.
Now we'll hear from Mary Ann Stewart.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Larry, Democratic Town Committee, and thanks to all of you for coming out tonight and engaging in this special election process as well. I am Mary Ann Stewart, and I live in Lexington with my husband, Duncan, and our youngest, who's still at home. And before I was appointed to the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education by Governor Deval Patrick in August of 2014, I was a twice elected sitting school committee member and former chairwoman. So now, as we consider the national political landscape that we're in, I'm seeing it's the backdrop to every conversation being had across the district from one end to the other as I'm talking to people in this campaign. And you're all asking, what can I do? And are we prepared? I'm running to be our next state senator in the special because I'm a champion for equity and excellence with a 20-plus year track record of influencing legislation, speaking up for children, youth, and working families. I'm a dedicated activist who has worked persistently on the ground for quality opportunity for all, as well as fighting for a system that's accountable and accessible to everyone. And I think we need leaders in state government who are activists themselves. I'm running on my personal record of leadership with results in the community and across the state, speaking up and out, pounding the pavement, engaging and holding conversations person by person, bringing in more people into those conversations, teaching others to lead, negotiating in good faith on the critical issues we face in the district, the economy and tax reform, protection for climate and the environment and workers' rights, public education, and public transportation. My actions over the 2 decades of leadership on these issues have clearly demonstrated my willingness and preparation to work persistently for these values. As Georgia O'Keeffe said, it's not enough to be nice, you've got to have nerve. My vision is for modern policies across the board, transportation, education, tax system, housing, jobs, that are all aligned with the way our economy should run as we enter the 3rd decade of the 21st century. The state has always been important. Our Constitution gives the states power, and people recognize that, and people are engaged, and we need to empower them now. Look, I've not had a career inside the State House, and that's a benefit to you, the voters, and everyone in the 4th. And before he was elected to the Senate, good Ken Donnelly wasn't on the inside either, which is why he was so effective. We need to continue with that approach because it serves our people best. My ears are always open to listen. I want to create conversation and dialogue, and I'm not beholden to any group or to any legislator. I will not make decisions in the State House before I have listened to all sides. I hope to earn your vote, and I'm excited to be here tonight. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now we'll get right to the media panel to start off the evening with a question each. So, Tom Zupa from the Lowell Sun, start us off.
Got my button. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, candidates, for being here this evening. Right now, healthcare composes about 40% of the state budget. What is the solution to controlling costs? And is that solution single payer at the state level?
Then Sean, then Mary Ann.
So I believe that healthcare is a right, and that everybody should have access to affordable and good quality healthcare. I personally believe in Medicare for all. Medicare is not a perfect system, but I think it's a great place to start. But having said that, I think there is a lot we can do right now to bring costs down and increase the quality of care. You know, we're a state where we allow our legislature and our statutes to bend the cost curve as opposed to saying you got to reduce it. So we say to people, it's okay if you raise your costs, but you only can raise them a little bit. Oh, and by the way, that little bit is greater than the cost of living, okay? We are the most expensive healthcare state in the most expensive healthcare country in the world, and our outcomes are not better. Given that, there is so much money to be taken out of this system while we increase our quality. And I believe that we need to get everybody at the table. We need pharmaceutical companies at the table, we need employers at the table, and we need insurers. And I don't believe that as a legislature and as a governor, we have made that commitment. And so I believe we can get a lot of cost out and improve the quality of our care. There's a doctor in Arlington who has a family practice that is a totally integrated medical system. And people come in there from babies to people who are 100 years old, and they get a complete quality of care, follow-up, they see their doctor, they know their nurses, and they've built a model where it's completely integrated, and it is amazingly effective, both in quality and in cost, and that's what we have to start to do.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you very much. I do support single payer. It's something that I think Massachusetts really needs to move towards. If the Republican plan is implemented, not only would Massachusetts lose anywhere between $1 to $2 billion right off the top, as been stated by Governor Baker, you would have 445,000 people in the Commonwealth lose their health insurance. And that would be a travesty, not just for the quality of care, but for our budget. Because those individuals, certainly the most poor in the Commonwealth, would go to the emergency room, and that would only increase costs. I completely agree on cost containment. I was one of the co-sponsors of cost containment to try to modernize our system, to modernize our record keeping, to make sure if you go to Leahy in Burlington or if you go into Boston that they're able to look at your chart, remotely. I think that's critical, but we need to do more in the area of cost containment, but we can't risk or sacrifice quality. But we really do need to stand up to the health insurance companies. They wage way too much control over the system, and they decide what gets covered and what doesn't. They don't offer coverage for multiple sclerosis. They don't offer coverage for protein disorders. They don't offer coverage for hearing aids before I filed the legislation and made them do it. It makes sense to cover many of these things, but what we really need to do is take that influence away from them and move towards a single payer.
Marianne?
Thank you. So I believe that everyone should be covered, and with healthcare, good quality healthcare. It should be affordable. It should be good quality. And I would start where I always start, by bringing everyone together to air their concerns and to share their ideas. And this issue hits close to home for me. When my husband Duncan was laid off from his full-time job some years ago, about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, we had a good severance package. And when COBRA payments kicked in, we paid them for a while. But after a while, we just couldn't afford it. This was before the Commonwealth Health Plan, Mass Health. So Duncan had good part-time consulting work, but nothing with benefits. And we went without health care for some time. I was beside myself. I worried day and night. And I know this is an issue that happens for people too. This is no way to have health care. We need health care that's continuous. It does need to be affordable. And we need to improve on the system that we have now. And that means we all have to come together and we all have to discuss this. Perhaps it will lead to a single-payer plan across the Commonwealth, which I would support if we can figure out a way to do this. I think it's the right way because it covers everyone and could be the least expensive of our options.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask Nick Greeno from the Billerica Minuteman to ask a question.
This is for all the candidates. With a diverse district, both economically and politically, how do you plan to balance the needs and wants of each community?
This time we'll start with Marianne, then we'll go to Cindy, and then we'll go to Sean.
Thanks. It's been great getting to know each each district, each town, each community in the 4th Middlesex, and I've really enjoyed talking to people from Billerica about your town. It is a diverse district, and I think everyone has, concerns about the future. And the way, we need to have these conversations. My value of fairness and opportunity for all is what will drive, meetings together to hear about where everyone wants to move. I know I've heard from a number of people about elevating the perception of the community. You've had some great projects underway with the road construction out there on the Boston Road, and some revitalization with some shopping centers in the economy. You have a rich history here, and with conservation as a center point. So there's a lot to be proud of, and I think getting to know everybody more closely is an important step for whoever becomes your next senator.
Thank you. Then what I'll do now is, since the poor gentleman has laryngitis, I'll ask a question on his behalf. Again, Ted Panos. I'm sorry. I apologize. Yep. Go ahead, Cindy.
So the question is how to balance the diverse needs of the district, is that? So over the past 9 years, I've worked with all the communities in this district, and there are differences, but there are very fundamental similarities. And everywhere you go, what I hear is traffic, healthcare, education, aging in place, and don't forget us. And those are equal across the board. If you're in Arlington or Billerica or Woburn, that is what people care about. They care about the quality of their community and the communities that they live in. So helping one helps them all. And we can learn from each other. Different communities can learn from how each other has solved problems. So I don't see it as a balancing act. I see it as what you need to do for each of your communities, but they're really similar. And it's all about the quality of life.
Sean?
Thank you very much. Well, during my decade in the House of Representatives, I have worked closely with the representatives, and obviously our past state senator, but the state representatives from all over the 4th Middlesex District. We've collaborated on issues that, regionalization issues, and issues that would make and do make the whole district stronger, whether it's public transportation, quality education, state funding, making sure Billerica High School and Arlington High School get rebuilt, making sure the Mass School Building Authority, that the reimbursement rate doesn't decrease, which is one of the concerns I have right now, increasing that. So that's the kind of state senator I will be. I will have a strong working relationship with all the state representatives in the district, as I do now, and work on the issues that impact the entire 4th Middlesex District, not just the 23rd Middlesex District, where I represent now. But I will be in these communities. I'm looking forward to representing Billerica because I want to be in this town every day, constantly working hard for the people of Billerica. That's how I am as a state representative for the people of Arlington and the people of Medford. That's how I'm going to be for the people of Arlington, Woburn, Billerica, Burlington, and Lexington. I will be in the communities, and I'm looking forward to that.
As I stated before and jumped the gun, Ted Panos from WCIP is unable to be here, but did email several questions in. So this is one of his questions for all the candidates. Last year, over 2,000 Massachusetts residents died of opiate overdose. Yet under criminal justice reform efforts, drug dealers are treated as nonviolent offenders. Should drug dealers, and particularly those selling heroin, fentanyl, and carfentanil, be classified as nonviolent drug offenders? And this time we'll start off with Sean, and then we'll go Mary Ann, and then Cindy.
Thank you very much. Those who are trafficking it, absolutely not. But there are so many who are incarcerated now who are low-level drug users, and they need support. If you look at our incarceration rates, over 50% of our inmates are dealing with addiction or dealing with mental health. It doesn't help the Commonwealth to not assist those people. We need to desperately help them, and we need to do more to help them. And I'll tell you what the biggest problem in this state is in dealing with the opiate abuse. It's the insurance companies. So one of the things I was very proud of tackling was around insurance coverage and making sure that that insurance companies were mandated to cover 14 days of treatment for those dealing with addiction. But the insurance companies have fought us every step of the way, and we know 14 days is not enough. I have addiction in my family and friends, and we know that 14 days is not nearly enough to deal with addiction. It needs to be 30 days. And that's one of the steps, not the only step, but that's one of the steps that we need to take to deal with this epidemic that does not discriminate based on geography, based on income. It is hitting all 351 cities and towns equally, and we need to really grasp it.
Marianne?
So this is such an important issue that it impacts every city and town across the Commonwealth. And Massachusetts is #1 in this, with this issue, with opiates in the community and the struggle with addiction and the high rate of death. I think, more important, I know there have been a lot of conversations in different places, but this, again, is an area where I think the community comes together around conversation about this issue. This is a heartbreaking health crisis. I think mental illness and addiction are important aspects. We need to treat them for the public health issues that they are, and not around incarceration. But, this issue also is personal for me, and this is another reason why I think it matters. My brother's son, my nephew, died of an opiate overdose. He died of heroin. He was 23 years old. That was 5 years ago. His addiction started in high school as a result of a football injury and, other issues on top of it. It wasn't a standalone issue. He had some mental health issues as well. So I agree with Attorney General Maura Healey that we need to do everything we can to bring our best imagination forward and bring in some education into the middle schools and continue our work in the communities to defeat this crisis once and for all. Thank you.
Cindy?
So I believe the question was, should there be, should we allow drug traffickers to be released from prison?
Be classified as nonviolent offenders.
No, I don't believe that, and I don't believe we do that today. I think the new laws that are being proposed would not include heavy trafficking of drugs. I agree that there should be a heavy penalty if you're a heavy trafficker of drugs, but I also I agree with Sean and Marianne that this is a more nuanced problem, and I believe that we need to hold the pharmaceutical companies more accountable than they are. I think they helped cause some of this, and that they need to come to the table and provide some input into how we deal with it, and some money. I believe that better treatment is really important. I think 21 days, I think 30 days is not enough. These are lifetime problems. It's like, if you had diabetes, would we give you a couple drugs and give you 20 days of treatment, then say, bye, see you later, and expect that you would, be okay? We got to get serious about treating people, and it frankly costs a lot less. If you don't think it's a moral issue, it's an economic issue. If you treat people early on and you continue engagement with them, they will stay on their treatment much more likely than if you just let them go. I could talk a lot about the intersection of mental illness and the opioid crisis, and the intersection of both of those and criminal justice. But I want to point out something else. This is also an economic problem. And our inner cities have been dealing with this for many, many, many years. And now it's come out to the suburbs. And it's not just that it's an opioid addiction. It's also an economic condition. It used to be 30 years ago, high school kids got jobs, college kids got jobs. They learned how to come into the workforce. we don't have those economic opportunities anymore. And so what we see is that people turn to other venues. And so if you can't get a job and you can't pay your rent, then you look at other options, whether we like it or not. If we don't deal with our economy and jobs and access to really good jobs, we're going to have a drug problem, and
Thank
it's
you,
going to
Cindy.
continue.
The next segment will be questions that were emailed in prior to the town committee. The first one is, this is for all candidates. Massachusetts ranks at or near the bottom of states in regards to the amount of money spent on police training. Do you believe that Massachusetts should devote more money to police training? If so, how would you convince your fellow senators and representatives to increase funding when they have refused to increase the amount in the past? And we'll start with Cindy. Cindy, then Mary Ann, then, excuse me. Yes, Cindy, Mary Ann. We'll go in order again. Cindy, Sean, and then Mary Ann.
I am very much in favor of increasing training for police. And in fact, we were very proud to have filed a bill that was called the Center of Excellence, which would give money for police training across the Commonwealth to help police deal with people who are suffering from a mental illness episode or a substance use disorder problem. Our police are now the front lines of the opioid and mental illness epidemic in our state. And they really want to learn how to do things differently. Because when you're dealing with somebody who's sick, it's very different from dealing with somebody who has just caused a crime or just committed a violent crime. And so I think that we need to increase the funding. The bill sets up a trust fund so that we can start to get money not only from the state, but from private grants and government grants. There's a lot of money out there for police training, especially in this area, and this bill would allow us to do that. And it would mandate that the state provide this level of training to police. So I'm very much for this, and I support this. I support the police in this area because what I have found is that they are really willing and determined to be effective in these areas.
Sean?
The answer is absolutely yes. You know, our police are on the front lines of every issue throughout our Commonwealth within the communities, and they work so hard to do an outstanding job, but they need the resources to come to help them do that job. One of the reasons I'm so proud of the endorsement from the Massachusetts Police Association is because of the work I've done with them to further programs like restorative justice from city to city, town to town, and to make sure they get the resources to do the job. Recently, this budget, I was a sponsor of an amendment to increase funding for training. You know, this is something when I'm in the office and I meet with police officers who come to talk to me about legislation, they consistently ask for the tools necessary to do the job. And one of those tools, and it's a critical aspect of it, is funding. And the truth is, since 2008, we've cut 200 earmarks, right? Earmarks for things like Best Buddies, Special Olympics. That's when the economy tanked. We are now, as the economy is getting better, except this past month where we have a lack of $500 million in revenue, but revenue over the past 12 months has consistently gotten better. And one thing that we need to do is invest in the critical programs that have been cut. Police training is one of those critical programs that have been cut dramatically since 2008, and we have seen the negative impacts in our cities and towns.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
So yes, I absolutely support funding. The challenge is, the choices that we make, where we're going to find the funding. You know, the Commonwealth has been challenged since the decisions that were made between 1998 and 2002, where we lost over $3 billion in revenue each year. This is where it comes out. And I think that, our community policing is so much of a public service, to protect and serve. And like teachers, they need resources. They need resources to get the work done, to really help, to protect, and to really serve the folks that are struggling with mental illness, who, they are the first ones to respond on the front lines for addiction and other kinds of abuse. And so so training for our police is essential. I totally support that.
Thank you. Next question, again to all candidates, is how would you keep our public universities and community colleges accessible for students with disabilities if federal funding is cut from programs like the TRIO program that helps students with disabilities be successful? And this order here will go with Mary Ann, then Cindy, then Sean.
Sure. So, I'm not really that clear about what that particular program is, but I certainly support students with disabilities at universities. As a parent of a child with special needs, I think this is a critical issue. I would say, currently the best plan we have right now is the Fair Share Amendment, which is moving forward, but it won't come to a vote until November 2018, and the money that would be gotten from that, the $2 billion roughly, would be split between public education and public transportation. And I really think that over time, this is a key priority for me. It starts with the Fair Share Amendment. It starts with the Foundation Budget Review Commission on K-12 to implement pre-K and full-day K, and then to work our way up and start making some changes into the funding for free higher ed as well. So yes, I need more conversation to understand what's happening in this regard, and I look forward to hearing more about it from all the folks who can tell me more.
Cindy?
So I think this question points to a broader issue, and that is funding for public education and public higher education, period. This program is being cut. They're now doing a buyout at UMass Boston to get professors and non-tenured workers to leave. So every program is going to be effective. And I think providing more money for the universities and our community colleges is the way that we're going to maintain these types of programs. And that leads to how do we get more money into our education system. And I believe that there are several ways that we can do this, and I'm happy to have a discussion right now about how I think we can get more money into the system. I'm not sure that's germane to the question, but I think we can put more money in. I think there is a fair share amendment which would ask people would tax income over $1 million at a slightly higher rate. I think we can look at our tax expenditures, how we put tax breaks out, and how we let corporations and other entities reduce their tax burdens. I think we can look at how some of our private universities avoid paying property tax, and ask them to put more money into the system specifically for education for all. I'll just give you one example. If a certain university in Cambridge had just gave 1% of their endowment over $1 billion towards taxes, we would be able to cover all subsidies for low-income and middle-class families in preschool and higher education. So I think it's a question of being creative about how we get more money into the system.
Thank you. Sean?
Thank you very much. We need to do better on public higher education. There is no doubt about it. I serve as the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Higher Education, and I'm the founder and the chair of the Public Higher Education Caucus. The 29 campuses of public learning across Massachusetts is really the foundation of our economy here is the Commonwealth. We see here with Middlesex Community College in Bedford and Lowell, we see UMass Lowell, how much it provides for this region of opportunity for the students who graduate is absolutely critical. We need to do better. I was proud to put forth my 50-50 legislation by building a coalition and being able to increase the amount of money for public higher education across the Commonwealth. We need to do better. What Cindy just said in terms of taxing the endowments, that is certainly a possibility. The fair share amendment, certainly a possibility, but we need to increase it. It's so critically important. The question was around kids with disabilities, and I'm the sponsor of the inclusive concurrent enrollment legislation, which would mandate that all kids with developmental disabilities, autism, Down syndrome, should have the right to go to college because it's a civil right. Right now, building coalitions, we have over 60 co-sponsors from the House and the Senate on that bill. We're going to pass it. The Speaker of the House has indicated his support. Senate President Stan Rosenberg has indicated his support. We're going to pass it. And when we remove the barriers and allow kids with developmental disabilities to go to college, the outcomes for them are that much better. It's a civil right. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody in the audience that would like to ask the candidates a question? Yes, sir. Come up to the microphone, please.
Hi there. I'm Jordan Weinstein from Arlington. I've worked in the broadcast industry for quite a while until my retirement, but there has been some talk within the campaign about the possibility of cutting tax subsidies or tax benefits, waivers, for certain industries where it's determined that it's not beneficial to the Commonwealth. And I was just wondering, concern to me and the film industry is the production tax incentive that's offered to film companies that come in and shoot in Massachusetts. Are you in favor of supporting that tax subsidy or eliminating it? Thank you.
We'll start with Sean, then Mary Ann, and then Cindy.
Thank you very much. I believe every tax credit needs to be scrutinized because if you look at our budget, $40 billion, the tax expenditure budget is huge amounts of money in the tax expenditure budget, which should be scrutinized every fiscal year. I support the film tax credit, but I believe it needs to be evaluated all the time because the money should not be going to Hollywood executives. We can reform it to make sure that the tax credit is going to job creation in the Commonwealth and not to Hollywood. The Senate has a very good proposal in terms of trying to reform the tax credit, but I think there's a way to keep the tax credit but also to keep the jobs here in the Commonwealth, not fund Steven Spielberg and Hollywood to allow them to keep their million-dollar mansions at the taxpayer of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' expense. However, other tax credits need to be looked at. The Fidelity tax credit is a great example. We gave tax credits in the 1990s to companies for job creation. Very important to look at tax credits for job creation. But now, since the recession, right, the jobs that Fidelity and other corporations have promised have gone away. But the tax credit has remained the same. So they're reaping the benefit, millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer money every year, and they promised to keep jobs in the Commonwealth. They haven't kept that promise. And at the same time, funding for education and transportation have declined. We need to do better. Tax credits need to be scrutinized. Thank you.
Mary Ann?
Yes, sure. So I believe, we need to be good stewards of our resources. We do need to take a much closer look at the credits that are being offered all around, not only in tax in the film industry, but for big corporations as well. We need to be looking at them with an eye to how we can actually support small businesses. Small businesses are the backbone to our communities. So I would support fair and equitable corporate and personal taxes, fees for, taking a look at the film industry as well, and with an eye to really improving and really understanding what we want to do and how we want to fund those things.
Cindy?
So I believe that the film tax credit is flawed. And if we look at all of the data, all of the research that's out there, I think we're getting 36 cents for the dollar or something. It's flawed. I agree that we can modify it. And I think we can do that in an effective way so that we keep our economy productive. But part of the problem is that we play this game of lowering the bar, right? So we fix the film tax so that it's more beneficial to Massachusetts. But then New York says, oh, no, but we're going to have a better tax break for you. And then North Carolina says, we're going to have a better tax. And so we get into this game where we just keep lowering the bar. And at some point, I think we have to get real about how we are going to provide services and opportunities for people without giving away the bank. GE is a really perfect example. We gave enormous amounts of tax cuts to GE. Guess what? GE came here because we are the hub of innovation, because we have a really good workforce, and we have a very good quality of life. So before we start playing the game of, no, I can give away more, I can give away more, I can give away more, we need to really understand, why are people coming here, and what is it about this place that they love? And it's the quality of life, it's our education system, it's the fact that we care about our environment, and those are the things that we need to ensure that we pay attention to, because that will continue to bring jobs here, I believe.
Thank you. Woman in the rear, you had a question? Yep.
I'm Marianne Wolf from Billerica. We all know that some time ago there was a referendum on recreational marijuana, and while I'm sure that not everybody in this room would agree on whether that was a good idea or not, the result of the referendum was in favor of allowing it. However, the state government seems to be taking a very long time to actually implement it. So this question for all of the candidates is, what is your opinion about taking this long to implement it? Do you think the delay is justified? Do you think that the delay will make a scattering of very local zoning laws and other regulations which will make it legally chaotic? Do you think it's a paternalistic government thinking if they don't act for long enough, then we'll forget which way the referendum went? What do you think?
I think I totally agree with you. Okay. First of all, there's a statute, and by statute, they have to come up with the regulations by June. Okay, now they can try and push this, the legislature can try and push that, but I think there's enough pressure to encourage them not to do that. So I don't think we're going to see what we saw with medical marijuana, where it took them 3 years to come up with the regulations. And I think there are real concerns about legalizing marijuana, but I also think that we can do it in a way that is reasonable. And as you said, the voters have voted, and it's our responsibility as legislators to roll out that bill in the best way we can. We're going to make some mistakes, okay? We can go back and fix them. Colorado has gone back and changed some of their regulations, and life has not ended as we know it. So I think it's really important that we ensure that people under 18 don't get access to drugs, just like we don't want them to have access to alcohol, and we need to ensure the safety of our youth, but we also have to respect what the voters have said.
John?
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you very much for your question around recreational marijuana. The voters made a very strong statement at the ballot box. I believe strongly that the legislature needs to uphold the will of the voters. I think that's critically important. I personally don't believe the delay that the legislature imposed was necessary. But to answer your question directly, I think it depends what the recommendations are from the panel. The panel went around the Commonwealth, they had 4 hearings, solicited feedback. Now they are producing the legislation. The legislation will involve everything from edibles to the tax rate to keeping our adolescents safe away from marijuana. But I think we could have done that without delaying the implementation. And so that was a disagreement I had with some of my colleagues in the House or the Senate. But I think it really is important to get it right, because we did not get medical marijuana right. Government did not do a very good job implementing that. We need to get this implementation well. So I think, to answer your question, I think that depends what the legislation looks like. I think we're going to be taking up a bill towards the summer, and I will be looking at to make sure that there are protections in place for what we're concerned about, but to make sure the will of the voters is not done away with. We need to make sure that the will of the voters is what's implemented. Thanks, Marianne.
Marianne?
Thanks for your question. So I have no doubt that we will implement the will of the voters, and the pressure that Cindy mentioned about, that legislators are feeling is an example of the kind of pressure from outside the State House that can really come to bear on an important issue that matters to people. So people who were concerned about, this getting dropped or just kind of getting pushed away, maybe not necessarily being taken up by the State House, even though the regulations require, or the statute requires regulations, is just an example of how important it is to have voices on the outside pushing on the inside. So yes, the committee is looking at it. That process is already in play, and we do have to wait to see what their recommendations are, and I'm very interested in seeing what that will be. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience? Anybody? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm James Cordero. I'm from Woburn, and I'm a millennial, and I look around this room and I don't really see any other millennials. So that begs the question, if you know, you probably know, Donald Trump's the president. This isn't a dream. And when we were voting this past November, millennials almost unilaterally rejected him. About, I think it's upper 60% of us or more voted for Hillary Clinton. We are against this new administration, frankly. However, when it comes to these local elections, we're not interested. We are not voting. And that's a problem for the Democratic Party as a whole and for all of you as well. I mean, the Democratic Party is powerless right now because they've lost local elections. Come 2018, if Republicans just take a few more states, they could call a constitutional convention and change our country. So is there anything in particular you, as our senator, or as potentially my senator, would do to generate interest, to break this mold of apathy that's seized not just millennials, but also the residents of this America as a whole, to get them interested in the process?
Let's start with Marianne, then Cindy, then Sean.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your interest and your engagement. I think this is great. And this is what I'm seeing from people. I don't see a lot of apathy happening from millennials and frankly, from anybody else. This particular administration has really got a lot of people up and paying attention and wanting to know how to get engaged. And that, I think, is so important right now. And that's something that I've got a lot of experience helping people to do, to get engaged, to stay in the process, help teaching folks how to lead and taking on, training and education for organizing and to, through that one-to-one conversation. I have no doubt that, and we've seen already in a number of local elections, special elections across the country, where there's a flip already happening locally. And you're right. If we want to change the party at the national level, we have to change the way we do business at the local and state level, which is one of the reasons why I'm in the race. So more people from the outside coming in with that kind of experience of activism, the kind of experience that matters in our communities of people who care on the issues. Is really critical. I'm really thrilled to have you here, and bring some friends next time. Thanks.
I did bring my brother, so.
Cindy?
I think there are a few things that we can look at. I have knocked on a lot of doors in this district, and it's amazing to me how many people not only don't know that there's an election, but don't even know who their state senator is or was. And and have a sort of general misunderstanding of the way our government works. So I thought I would never say this in my life because it sounds so old, but I think we need to start teaching civics again. I think we need to teach people how our government works because so many people don't know that. And clearly, if you don't teach it, it's something that we don't value. So I think that's the first thing that I would say that would really help people to at least understand how their world works. The second piece is what I notice with younger people is that they're no longer so affiliated with a party. They're not a Republican, they're not a Democrat, they're an issues-focused group. And what people care about is issues like the environment, like corporations and big business in elections, like education and funding for higher education. And I think it is absolutely beholden on our party to stop with the labels and start looking at the issues. Because what happens is when you start looking at issues, all manner of people, millennials and older people and middle-aged people, agree with each other. But as long as we say you have to be a Democrat, you have to be a Republican, that this is the Democratic Party, this is the structure, we have to follow that, and you come in and you have to go along with us, you guys are going to keep dropping out. So I think that that's really important, and I think it's absolutely wonderful that you're here. Thank you.
Great.
John?
James, thank you for the question. I ran for the legislature when I was 22. So one of the things I would advise is you should run for office. And I think young people...
Is that an endorsement?
Young people across the state should run for office. And I'm still a millennial, and I think Cindy's absolutely right. It's about issues. It's about fighting towards renewable energy, a modernized transportation system, affordable housing, more funding for public higher education. Those are the issues. People are inspired by issues. But another thing is we need to engage the younger generation to make sure that they're involved. And one of the things that I proposed, and we're still trying to get it passed, is around lowering the voting age in municipal elections. And I think this is important. We can't do it federally because of the Constitution, but I believe that 16-year-olds should be allowed to vote in municipal elections. It's something that is important. And the reason for that, James, as a senior, when you're 18, you're busy, you're trying to get ready for college, you're trying to figure out, where you're going for prom, or, you're busy. And so getting involved in the political process is not at the forefront of your mind. If, as a 16-year-old, when you're a sophomore, and build it into the curriculum a teacher could, to get you engaged as a voter and engaged around issues and candidates, you're more likely to stay engaged for the rest of your life. And so that's something that I proposed. I think it's really, really important that we pass. As well, obviously, taking money out of politics. We need to overturn Citizens United. And as Cindy said, we need to establish a civics curriculum. Thank you, James, for coming.
Thank you all.
Are there any other questions here? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Pam Boris, and I'm from Woburn, or from the Middlesex watershed. And we are facing increasing environmental problems. And I've done what I could. I've got my solar, electric, and hot water on my house. But I'm increasingly concerned that locally, statewide, nationally, I hear nothing about forward-looking, how are the rising tides going to affect us? Should we be hardening our utilities? Should our building, should our buildings have to have all the wiring and electricity and everything on the top rather than in the basement? We live in a very wet area. It's only going to get wetter. What do you plan to do about the environment?
All right, we'll start with Sean, Marianne, and then Cindy. Sean?
Pam, thanks so much for your question. This is the question of the day, especially with what the president just decided with the Paris Accords. Massachusetts, just like every other state, whether we do it regionally as New England or as a state, we need to take the lead on renewable energy. And so this past session, I've worked with Environment Massachusetts and other environmentally conscious organizations and legislators, and I'm the lead sponsor of the 100% renewable energy bill by 2050, because that's a bold step. It would be 2035 in utilities and all sectors by 2050, and that would allow Massachusetts to take a leadership role, and this is something that we need to do. We have over 50 co-sponsors in the House and the Senate supporting the bill, and it would be a bold step that Massachusetts has to do in light of what's going on in Washington, D.C. in terms of climate change. But that's not the only thing that we can or should be doing. We should be investing more in DEP and DCR, state agencies that are tasked with protecting our environment, that we have cut to unbelievably low margins since 2008, where they practically can't do their job because of the lack of state funding. We have to raise the net metering cap. I support lifting it. The utility companies have way too much control around that issue. But we also need to invest in water infrastructure. You know, we talk about supporting transportation. We need to support infrastructure, not just a bond bill, but actual direct revenue to support our infrastructure underneath the roads. Thank you, Pam.
Okay, but we also need our building codes. We need our building codes to look forward 100 years.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Marianne?
So it's interesting, thank you for your question. A couple of things I'm thinking just on this last comment that you made about building codes, because the Senate took up, zoning reform last year and passed that, where the House never picked it up. So they're behind on that piece. But we can't be silent about the real danger that climate change poses to our future and our future generations. And climate change is real, and it has zero support coming from Washington. So Sean's absolutely right. We do need to be very strong here in Massachusetts and really take a holistic view of what we can actually do. And if we're looking at regional work, then we're going to continue with that. But specifically, I think one way that Massachusetts can contribute is through the technological innovation, that we need to find a way to make incentives work. Solar is the low-hanging fruit for renewables, and we need to really maximize that piece. And there is tension that exists between the renewable energy industry and the power companies because they pretty much have outgrown the model that was established some couple decades ago to really to bring forward this subsidized model in the last decade or so. And so this is one of the issues of our time, and I think that one of our priorities should also be to set a carbon price, and whether that's through a fee or a dividend, it's important that we provide an indication to the industry that we really need to move forward on this as quickly as we can.
Cindy?
To your question, I think that we do need to be more proactive in our building codes.
Thank you.
It's a very difficult thing to do. It's town by town, and the town has the authority. And I know that in Arlington, there's a lot of pushback because initially it costs more money, it's harder to do, you make less money as a builder, so it's a real struggle. Now, Boston is starting to do that on the waterfront. They have very strict codes for the building that they're doing on the waterfront. But it's kind of a weird way to go about it, right? It's like, we know the water's coming, so we'll protect our buildings. We won't try and mitigate the environment so that we can reduce that, okay? We're going to now build our buildings. And frankly, who can live in those buildings are very wealthy people. So they'll be protected, but all the rest of us will have to deal with the flooding. There's another thing I think we really need to do in addition to what Marianne and Sean said. We do not regionally plan in this state. And that is a huge issue because you can't, the water of Billerica doesn't stop at Billerica, right? the Burlington build-out does not stop at Burlington. Every city and town around it is affected. And if we don't start pushing for regional planning, we're not going to be able to address the problem.
Right, thank you.
Now I'd like to head back to media representatives. And Nick, if you have another question.
Taking into account the impact on small businesses, what's your stance on raising the state minimum wage?
In this one here, we'll start with Cindy, then Sean, and then Mary Ann.
I really respect the small business owner, and I respect what that brings to our communities. I really think we need to raise the minimum wage. It costs us, a family of 4 who has 2 parents who work and 2 children, $40 an hour, each of them, is what they have to make in order to earn a living wage. And we're arguing with $15. We have such disparity in our society between the haves and the have-nots. Most of the people, over 75% of the people in this Commonwealth, work for companies that are over 50 people. We have got to raise our minimum wage. And what happens when you raise the minimum wage is that all the other wages come up. The data is out there, it shows that. It's a difficult decision to make, and I think we could possibly look at putting a cap on what a small business is. So if you're a person and you own a restaurant and you and your wife and you have 2 people working for you, we could have that conversation. But there are so many people who are not even making their $8 an hour, who, for instance, are in the restaurant business, and they work in small restaurants. They can't afford their rent. So what do we do? So I really believe that we've got to raise the minimum wage.
Sean?
Thank you. I strongly support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. I think that's something that's absolutely critical. As a legislator, I was part of raising the minimum wage a couple of years ago. At the time, it was the highest in the country. Not anymore. We need to raise it to $15 an hour. If you talk to many of my constituents in Arlington and Medford, especially in the real estate industry or the restaurant industry, or whichever industry you can pick, many of them work 2 or 3 part-time jobs just to make ends meet, just to get ahead. Many of them spend 30% of their income on housing. That's housing costs alone, 30%. They can't make ends meet on $11 an hour or $12 an hour. And quite frankly, they can't make ends meet on $15 an hour either. But this is a promise that we should make. It should be $15 an hour. And I will tell you this, we also need to enact paid family medical leave. That is something that should go along with the $15 an hour minimum wage. Paid family medical leave is a promise that we should pass. Representative Ken Gordon from Burlington is the legislator who has filed that legislation. I'm proud to have his support in this campaign, but we need to enact both measures. Thank you.
Mary Ann?
Thank you. I support increasing the minimum wage. $15 an hour is an improvement over the current $11 an hour, but real living wage is far north of 15, more like $20 an hour. I was proud to work on the ballot initiative to raise the minimum wage to the implementation up to the 2 phases that brought us up to $11 an hour a couple of years ago, back in 2013. The election, I think, was 2014, as a ballot initiative, and to raise the issue of guaranteed earned sick time. The concern, I think, is around the challenge for small businesses, very small businesses, who need to pay their workers, and then maybe they aren't bringing home what they need to bring home. Maybe it's a lot less, but those are conversations we need to have. But I also feel that putting that money, the truth is when you pay a higher wage, the money goes right back into the community, and that is better for everybody. So I agree with Sean about paid family medical leave, because no one should have to choose between their job and caring for a loved one, whether that's someone who needs medical care or welcoming a child into the family.
Tom, a question?
Sure. Thank you. I'd like to follow up with a related jobs question. Massachusetts has a very low unemployment rate, one of the lowest in the country. But if you talk to business owners, large and small, in Billerica and throughout the district, they have a hard time filling specific jobs because they can't get the people out to this area. Is this a problem that requires a government solution, or should this be a private sector solution?
We'll start with Mary Ann, and then Cindy, and then Sean.
This is a shared problem. Clearly, it's a shared concern for the businesses that need the workers and for folks who are looking for good work. Transportation is one of these overarching issues. It's like a Venn diagram, right? It's connected with transportation and housing and education and workforce training. We need to be taking a holistic look at all of this and figuring out the best ways to move the Commonwealth forward. So we need to have a lot of conversation about this. I'm sure there are, as a member of the Board of Ed, we've actually had several joint meetings with folks in the higher ed to talk about workforce training, and there has been some influx, some input, some investments into making this bringing this, elevating this as an issue, in addition to the way the business has been impressing on K-12 to, move this issue forward as well. So we need to keep working at it. It's not something that's going to be solved immediately, but yeah, let's keep working on it.
Cindy?
So the question is how train people out to...
Bringing people out to this area, is it a private solution or a public solution?
Well, I'd like to answer that first by saying that transportation is a public service, and it needs to be provided by our state. Transportation is a huge problem for all this district, and part of it is getting people from, Cambridge and Boston and Lowell, wherever, into our district. And I think that it is very much a government issue, because I think it's a public good, and everybody needs a good transportation system, and everybody has to have access to it. But I also think that we allow our companies, especially large ones, to make it a state problem without trying to engage in solving the problem. So I think it's okay to ask companies to put some skin in the game to help get their workers out to this area. But fundamentally, I think that the government is responsible for transportation, because it is the weaving wire between all of these issues: economic development, jobs, security, housing. And we need to create a transportation system that can not only get people out to here, but can get people from here into where the economic hub is. And as that economic hub gets denser and denser, people pack into a smaller area. So they end up living in Billerica, and then Billerica's prices go up, and their housing goes up, and children come in, and we want that. But we're just squeezing people into a very finite area because we don't have a transportation system. So I think it's fundamentally a government responsibility, and I think it's okay to ask our employers to contribute.
Thank you, Cindy. Sean?
Thank you. 4 years ago, the debate we were having was whether or not to cut service from the MBTA, whether it be commuter rail on the weekends, or raising the cost of the ride, or cutting bus lines out of Alewife Station that came up to Burlington and to the Bedford VA. That was the conversation we were having. It wasn't investing in transportation. As the chair of the caucus, I worked with colleagues in the House and the Senate, and we stopped those service cuts. But we're not grappling the problem as we should, and the problem is the $5.3 billion debt of the MBTA. And that's how we're going to modernize our transportation system. By making our RTAs forward funding, we fix part of the solution around the RTAs, but we still need to invest more in the RTAs across the state as well. I think collaboration between private businesses and the MBTA and state government is critical, but it should not lead to privatization. I'm strongly against privatizing the MBTA and other important state services, but I think the businesses here in the Commonwealth benefit when they have some skin in the game, whether it be revenue, whether it be transporting their employees, but partnering with state government. I think that's something that's very, very important. But I also think businesses should partner with state government in a whole host of areas, whether it be transportation, whether it be setting up universal college savings accounts and supporting community colleges because of the future training and education of our future workforce. That's something that benefits not just businesses, but the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and increases our quality of life.
We have a question. Senate Bill 291 would ban Massachusetts schools from using Native American imagery and themes for their mascots and logos. Are you in favor of Senate Bill 291? And Sean, let's start off with you. Sean, then Mary Ann, then Cindy.
Well, I know the mascot is the Indians, so that's a germane question. I do not support the Senate bill. I know it was filed by my friend Senator Barbara L'Italian. She filed it on behalf of a constituent. In the legislature, we are known as the free petition state, where every member of the Commonwealth, every citizen has the right to file legislation. And that's important. And I have filed a number of pieces of legislation that I may not have personally have supported, but we believe that every constituent should have the right to be heard. Barbara doesn't know if she supports the bill she filed, but she believed in the right of her constituent to ask her to file the bill. That's part of being a legislator, right? You act on the will of the voters to file legislation. So I don't necessarily support that piece of legislation. I'm sure the hearing is coming up soon, but that piece is by request. It is not a piece of legislation that was filed on behalf of a legislator. It was on behalf of a constituent for that particular legislator.
Mary Ann?
So I think this is an example of a conversation for the community. This is a local issue. This is up to the school committees and the Board of Selectmen to engage people in the community about. I wouldn't support this as a state law, but I would want to be part of those conversations that would happen and see what ideas and concerns get aired. And then if I have an opinion about that, I would want to share it and listen to what other people have to say as well.
Cindy?
I think this is very much a local issue. This is what city and towns get to decide on their own. And I even think as the senator, if this was a conversation in Billerica, I would not weigh in on it. It would be the decision of the people in this community to decide what they wanted to name their sports teams.
Next question is for all candidates again. Should Massachusetts go back to an annual sales tax holiday as a way of boosting state retail businesses? And again, it'll be Cindy, Sean, and Mary Ann.
I love the idea of a sales tax holiday, and all of the data from all of the years that we've had it has shown that it does not increase consumption, and in fact, we just lose tax dollars from it. And it's a wonderful way to get people into stores, but in the end, when you look at the benefit, the what we lose in tax dollars far outweighs what we gain by it. And the data shows over and over that those people would have gone into those stores and bought those items. So I think it's fine that we passed on the sales tax holiday this year.
Sean?
I have voted against the sales tax holiday, certainly during times when revenues are tight. We're still, the Senate just finished their budget deliberations, the House finished theirs a month before that, and currently we're about $500 million in shortfall in revenues for the month of April. A lot of that is because of Donald Trump's proposal tax plan or possible, so there's a lot of wealthy people in the Commonwealth who are hedging their bets and waiting to see what that plan looks like. So we're hoping that income tax rate and the revenues will pick up. But certainly with the $500 million deficit at the moment, it would be unwise to implement a sales tax holiday, especially when, in all honesty, most sales tax holidays, many businesses raise their prices, and so there's really not a sale for the consumer. It does get people into the store and they think they're saving money. They're really not. And at losing hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, especially in the month of April when we're $500 million in a shortfall, it's just not wise prudence of taxpayer dollars in running the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Marianne?
No, I don't support the sales tax holiday, and I would do everything I could to eliminate it once and for all.
Just in light of that, is another question, sort of a follow-up in relation to state tax revenues. Again, state tax revenues for May came in at 1.9% less than expected. Do you believe that new taxes are needed to raise revenue for the state? And if so, which ones? And we'll start with Marianne. Marianne?
I'm sorry, there's a lot of reverberation. Can you just repeat the last part of that
Do
question?
you believe that new taxes are needed to raise revenue for the state? And if so, which ones?
Oh, okay. So raising revenue. So like so the fair share amendment I talked about briefly earlier, and that is raising revenue among those with the greatest ability to pay. People making over $1 million. I think that's fair. Everyone should pay their fair share. And I think going forward, that is a good way to approach. I don't think we should, my value on this is that everything should be fair, including taxes, in terms of the way that they are, that the system is built for taxation. We do have two critical flaws in our current tax system. One, it's inadequate, and two, it puts a burden on those with the least ability to pay the greatest share. And so that's why the Fair Share Amendment is happening right now. It's been 4 years, it'll be 4 years in the making before it comes to a vote for voters. And like I said earlier, it will be potentially about $2 billion to be split between public education and public transportation. I'm proud of the role that I've been playing with this amendment as one of the 10 original signers to bring this ballot initiative forward to Attorney General Maura Healey for her approval for signatures to the citizenry. So, we need to be, again, as I said in my opening remarks, coming up with a modern approach to all of our systems is something we are going to have a serious conversation about in the State House and in our communities, because we are not serving everybody very well.
Okay, Cindy?
I do believe that we need to raise revenue. I think there are a couple other areas that we can look at as well. The first place is we're losing a lot of money on online sales. And I think we have to take a look at, as a state, how people are buying and purchasing goods. We had a sales tax, and we are losing enormous amounts of money, and that's why we're seeing such a huge depletion of revenue coming in, because people are buying online, but we're not keeping up with that. So I think we have to increase our ability to tax purchases online. I will go back to getting more people to get skin in the game. I believe that we should look very hard at our how we give people tax breaks, and I think things like reducing or eliminating a tax on airline fuel for personal aircraft is something that we probably would all agree shouldn't happen, that I think it would be okay to tax gas for your personal airplane. Those are what some of our tax breaks are. And it's been very difficult to get the legislature to even look at what those are and to make them public so that we all can understand how we're spending our money. And finally, I think we need to ask more of our corporations and our universities who so benefit from the quality of life and the education system and the amazing benefits of living in Massachusetts to give us a little more, to put in a little more, and to be a bigger part of our communities. And I think with that and some tax increases, we can get a lot more revenue into this state.
Thank you, Cindy. Sean?
Thank you very much. 4 years ago, when we were having that debate, or 3 years ago, shortly right before that dreadful winter of 2015, we had a debate in the legislature whether or not to raise revenues. Governor Patrick proposed a $1.9 billion tax increase where he would raise the income tax and lower the sales tax. The legislature took a different approach where we raised $500 million in increasing the sales tax by 3%, or 3 pennies. The problem with that tax, and one of the reasons I voted against it, was it was regressive and it was inadequate. We told the taxpayers of Massachusetts, by raising your sales tax, we're going to finally fix infrastructure and the problems with the MBTA. And it didn't even come close. So any future revenue conversations, the taxpayers of Massachusetts, the hardworking taxpayers of Massachusetts, are willing to pay for services that are important for this economy, for them and their families, but they want to make sure the tax is adequate, and they want to make sure it's progressive, meaning that those who can most afford it are paying it. A number of my colleagues mentioned some of the revenue options, whether it be, and I strongly support eliminating the Fidelity tax credit, but also implementing the Fair Share Amendment. I was part of the coalition of reps to bring this forward and to strategize with senators and House members to try to get this passed in a constitutional convention. We did it last session. We're doing it this week. I'm going to be proud to vote yes to get it on the ballot for 2018, but we also have to look at online sales and other initiatives, but it needs to be progressive, and the revenue generated needs to be adequate. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
Yeah, good evening, George Noel, Billerica. I would like to know how you would fix wage theft. Wage theft is a problem. Every year, the cities of Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles lose $3 billion a year. Nationwide, $50 billion are stolen from workers. Could you imagine if our nation's banks were getting robbed to the tune of that amount of money instead of robbing us? It would be a crisis. What would you propose to put an end to wage theft?
And we'll start with Sean, then Mary Ann, then Cindy.
George, thank you so much for your question. Our workers deserve better than having their wages stolen from under them, without a doubt. We had a situation in Arlington that's a legal matter right now where a business is accused of wage theft, and there are about 15 employees that are involved. I have stepped in, working with the employees to try to make sure they get representation and can recoup those lost wages, especially when the particular business, 2 of the employees are working 3 part-time jobs just to make ends meet. It's not right, it's not fair. There's a wage theft bill at the State House right now that would put strong teeth holding businesses accountable for what they do with their employees and making sure that there's fairness for our employees to make sure that wage theft doesn't happen. I strongly support the legislation, and I'm looking forward to being passed soon. But our employees deserve better, and we need to hold businesses accountable.
Mary Ann?
Thank you. We do need to hold businesses accountable. This is completely unfair, and I'm not sure to the degree. I'm not as familiar with the details of the bill that Sean just mentioned, but I'm very interested in knowing more about it. This is a problem, and it's happening in lots of places. We need to be, first of all, paying fair wages in general and agree with that, and then the subcontracting and the hiring of folks to continue the work, we need to be paying them the fair wages as well. And so, yes, we have to hold businesses accountable for that.
We can start by holding companies, subcontractors accountable for how they pay their employees. So today, when you're a big construction company, when you're building a big building, you pretty much subcontract out everything. And if there's wage theft by your subcontractors, which it is rampant, George, you are absolutely right, it is a huge problem. When it happens by the subcontractor or the subcontractor, the company, the parent company says, well, it's not our problem. So if we want to stop wage theft, then what we need to do is hold companies accountable for their subcontractors and their subcontractors to ensure that they pay a living wage, the prevailing wage, or the union wage. And if they don't, then the parent company needs to pay. And when the Senate did this last time, when we tried to address wage theft, particular piece was taken out of the bill. And very proudly, I sat with the Senator Donnelly and we talked about it, and he voted against it. He voted against the bill because it didn't go far enough. And if you don't hold subcontractors accountable for wage theft and the companies that hire those subcontractors, you will never solve this problem.
Yes, sir. Gentleman on the first row.
Thank you. George Similaris over here. And my question is that the Billerica here in town, I happen to be a selectman, and that we have $300 worth of OPEB insurance liabilities. And I know on the state level that you just had the supplemental budget that bailed out the MBTA for $45 million, I think. Is that correct, recently? And the billions of unfunded pensions that the state has. So my concern is that how, as these pensions go by, we're talking about revenue and great ideas on that 50-50 millionaires tax. I would support that coming to the ballot for sure, and we need to do something. But we also have to try these monies coming in our OPEB, for example, in Billerica is growing at millions every year, and it's going to come down the road when the state is billions in liabilities. How, I know it's a tough question, and everybody's puts that main question down the road, but what you said, Cindy, was that your main goal for the future would be to have Medicare for everybody. I wouldn't be thinking that you'd be talking about all public employees also and state employees, but anyway, my question is, how will we deal with these big pensions coming down there, all these liabilities? And I am very fearful of new growth. I mean, we keep talking new growth here in Billerica. New growth will not keep up. We can't only have so many trees and so much land. So my question is, and I'll sit down for this, is what ideas do you have for curbing these unfunded liabilities that surely are taking their toll out of all budgets? Thank you.
All right, we're going to we're going to start with Cindy, then Sean, then Mary Ann.
It's a very interesting question. I do believe when I was speaking about healthcare that it would be for everybody, including state employees. I think it's absolutely bizarre that we require employers, whether they're state or personal, or private companies, to pay for health insurance. I think it's a model that just doesn't work. And I think we need to get employers out of the business of being responsible for health insurance. Pensions are an interesting issue. Right now, in our pension system, if you are an employee and you come in, like I did, to work in the State House, I pay 11% toward my pension. If I were to retire in 40 years, 30 years, and I got my full pension, I will have paid 101% of that pension. So the pension system turns out to be a great deal for the state, because instead of paying Social Security at 6.25, 6.5%, they get to pay into a pension. And if they did that all along, if state and municipalities paid their fair share all along, their pension requirement would be 2.5%. So 2.5 versus 6.5, okay? The problem is the employees paid, but the state and the municipalities didn't. So now we're up against that. I do not think it's fair to ask employees who put their money into the pension system to somehow bail us out. Now, the card's just gone up, so I need to stop there. But I think OPEB is other post-employee benefits, and it's health care. It's basically health care, and if we go back to cutting costs out of health care, which I believe we can do, and increase quality, we will be able to address the OPEB problem.
Sean?
Thank you very much. I think it's absolutely immoral for us to change the rules of OPEB or to lay those obligations on the employees who worked hard every single day, paying into the fund with much of their income, and then after they retire, mandating some regulation from the state because the state didn't fund it or the local municipalities didn't fund it, taking it out on the employee. It's not only unjust, it's immoral, and it's wrong, and it's certainly something that I have fought for the 9 years to make sure whatever OPEB reform that we would embrace on Beacon Hill wouldn't include an unfair treatment to employees who gave everything in their work, especially as they hit retirement. Certainly health insurance is one of those big pieces we need to tackle. I think moving to single payer is one of the ways to not only take health insurance companies out of it, but to address the greed and to create more revenue. That's what a single payer system would certainly allow. But with the direct OPEB obligation, we in the House of Representatives have certainly implemented a lot of reforms in terms of direct revenue of our budget, either from the rainy day fund, other revenues that I would like to see go to transportation or public education, we have put into the OPEB obligation. So that's something we need to do more of to certainly help municipalities deal with this, George, but not taking it out on our employees.
Marianne?
So I think the state has a problem, a chronic problem with unfunded mandates, and also our federal government does too. I agree with so much of what both Cindy and Sean have said. I think that the single payer will help, but I also, I think more than that is any changes in health care should not come out of employees' pensions or any other benefit or anything else that anything that they're providing. It needs to come out of cost containment, and I think this is how single payer can help us going forward. But it is a thorny problem, George, and we're going to have to work on it, and it's going to take some time. But yeah, we need to do that.
Yes, front row.
Hi, my name is Timmy, and I'm a constituent from Burlington. Burlington is a neighborhood that's starting to gentrify. Over the last couple of years, new houses that come on the market have a starting price of $1.1 million, which is preventing a lot of residents like myself who go away to college from coming back and moving into our homes. It's pushing a lot of our community members out, and it's preventing new community members from coming in who otherwise couldn't afford that. So I'm curious to know what you have done in the past for affordable housing units and what you will continue to do to ensure affordable housing in Middlesex 4th.
Right. This will start with Marianne, then Cindy, then Sean.
We need more affordable housing. I'm familiar with the issue in Burlington. I was at the meeting where where the planning board was discussing the issue as far as the master plan for housing, the housing plan. There was a big forum a couple of weeks ago. And I think, you know, this is a case where when a community comes together around a shared problem, can really come up with the best ideas. Now, I know there has been some reform happening at the state level last year in the Senate that had to do with zoning, but a lot of these issues, as they play out locally, you know, the state needs to support more affordable housing. We're desperate for more affordable housing. And I have, again, my family, we came in, you know, we live in Lexington, but we live in a very modest home. We came in to Lexington on an affordable housing program. And I think since we benefited from that plan, we had a 5-year lease, and we weren't sure we were going to be able to find a house, but we did. We found one of the last little houses in the corner, in the back, in the dark. But that's where, you know, I hope that we can have, because of that, I can see just how important it is to let other people have that opportunity. It makes a huge difference. And again, this is one of those issues that is so intersects with our transportation and jobs and just so many other things that makes it more complicated, but we have to figure out an answer that works.
Cindy?
This is an issue across this district. You hear it everywhere. And there is a lot of discussion about increasing density in housing. Arlington right now is very dense. There's one remaining parcel of open space. So we would in Arlington really have to build up in order to increase housing, because the issue is there's more demand than there is supply. So I think you can do smart zoning and you can look at density, but you can't do it without providing a really robust transportation system. Because what's happening is people are coming in, and they're coming in with their 2 and their 3 cars, and we're building more housing, and they're bringing in more cars, and traffic is increasing. And but they're coming to Burlington, and they're coming to Lexington and Arlington and Billerica and Woburn because that's where the economy is. And they can be really close to their jobs. And because we don't have a robust transportation system, they get in their cars and they drive, right? And more people come into the area because this is where they can live and get to their jobs. So if we don't deal with our transportation problem and create a transportation system that is much more radial, that goes out farther and allows people to get to their jobs but live in their communities, then we're going to see this cycle of increased housing. Cities and towns have to figure out how they can address the housing problem with smart zoning and still keep their quality of life. And without the state helping them provide other alternatives, such as transportation that gets you in and out, you're going to continue to see, I think you're going to continue to see this cycle. So we on the state level have to deal with transportation. The cities and towns need to be responsible for how they want to zone in their own areas.
Thank you, Cindy. Sean?
Thank you very much. I think it's critical for the state to work with cities and towns to help figure out much of the housing problems facing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's certainly not isolated to the Fourth Middlesex. This is a problem that's facing east of 495 without a doubt. And one thing that I'm certainly proud of is the work I've done in the House with many of my colleagues, actually both in the House and the Senate, to pass the housing bond bill, to provide the implementation of more funding to housing units across the Commonwealth. But I also think we need to look at what the Senate did in the zoning bill and pass certainly portions of it, but also look at different items like inclusionary zoning and different things to that extent that will certainly help with housing and housing production. But also, we need to take care of those who are on the verge of becoming homeless or who are homeless right now. working with my colleagues in the House, I filed the legislation to increase the amount of support for the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program. And the way that works, it's a voucher similar to Section 8 at the federal level, even though at the federal level, Section 8 vouchers get a lot more support than the MRVP at the state level. But you're able to take that and give it to a family that's about to become homeless, where they could receive permanent stabilized housing. And why that is so important is because they wouldn't be in a hotel motel. And why that is so important is stabilization, and because moving families to a hotel or to a motel actually costs the Commonwealth more, where the Mass Rental Voucher Program provides stabilized housing for families across this state.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience? Yes, sir. Mr. Ryan.
Good evening. My name is Donald Ryan from Billerica, and a former state employee. And I come before you as something of sort of a personal interest. Cindy, Sean, and Mary Ann.
Microphone down, Don.
Pardon? Oh. As you get older, you shrink, a bit. So we have several thousands of retired, dedicated state employees who spent many years performing nobly in many areas, the police, the teachers, etc. When Jane Swift became acting Republican governor, she eliminated the partial health care payment, approximately 85% received by retirees, due to the same coverage cost being paid into Medicare. This amounted to each retiree and their spouse receiving approximately $500 per person per year from the Commonwealth, due to their paying twice for the same coverage. Senator Donnelly advocated through the Mass State Retirees Association that this past practice, in fairness, should be reinstated. Will you advocate that this past practice, in fairness to the retirees, be brought before the legislature and enacted if and when you are elected as state senator representing my district?
Sean, Mary Ann, and then Cindy.
Yes, absolutely. Outstanding question. Whenever Beacon Hill tries to reform things around health insurance or pensions, it's incredibly important that retirees are not harmed by any of what Beacon Hill tries to do. In the past couple of budgets, Governor Baker has tried to make retirees pay more, and it's wrong, and we need to fight back. Retirees have given everything. They have given everything to, whether it's the fire department or the Department of Public Works or the police, whatever it may be. They deserve retirement benefits that are fair and not taxed or changed during midstream by the government. So we need to actually, in my opinion, I think we should give more benefits to our retirees, but certainly not change anything current to the benefits that retirees are making now. It's completely unconscionable what Governor Baker tried to do in some of his budgets around making retirees pay more, and I voted against that. And if I'm elected to the state Senate, I will continue to be a strong advocate and strong fighter for retirees if I'm so lucky to earn your vote in the state Senate. Thank you.
Mary Ann.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your service. I'm in full support of Mass State retirees getting reinstated. What's fair? I would speak up for that in the Senate anytime, just like Ken did. And I think this midstream correction, that is not that doesn't support our retirees is outrageous, and that's completely unfair. So I agree.
Cindy?
I worked on these issues with Ken for 9 years, and you know what a champion he was on this, and I am very, very proud that I helped him write some of that legislation. We got through a number of bills in this area in the Senate, and they died in the House. And I think that there are a couple things that are up front now that we can help with. Number one is putting retirees on the GIC, the Group Insurance Commission, which determines rates for health insurance. I think that we can freeze cities and towns from cost-shifting premiums onto retirees, which they can do now whenever they want. And I think it's going to take a lot of advocacy outside and inside the building to stop this from happening. But I will tell you one thing, seniors have an incredible voice. And when we worked with the mass retirees, who I'm very happy to say have supported me in this campaign, when we work with them, we can get things done, at least in the Senate. So you're absolutely right. These are unfair. We have widows who their pensions are $3,000 a year, and it's their only source of income. So we've been also trying to change that. But this is really important.
Thank you for your encouragement.
All right. Yes, sir. Gentleman in the center. Right there. Yes, sir. This is probably going to be the last question, and just to give you a little preview here, and each of the candidates are going to have a 2-minute wrap-up. And then just to remind everybody that the candidates have agreed to hang around and mingle with you, and there's free refreshments out in the hallway, so we encourage you to ask any other questions you may have and didn't get to tonight afterwards. Okay, sir.
First of all, I'd like to thank the candidates. It's a pleasure to have 3 candidates that I'd be willing to vote for, and I have to choose among the better of them. But I'm very curious about what your priorities and legislative goals are. If you could very briefly tell me what your primary legislative goal is for the first year that you would be in office if you are elected, and 2, how would you split your time between legislative committees, constituents, and so forth. I'm very interested in how each of you would handle your job.
Fine, we'll start with Cindy, then Sean, then Mary Ann.
Asking what your priority is like asking what your favorite child is. It's not easy. There's a number of things that I would champion. But I think right now the best way for me to answer that is to stop bad things from happening. We have a number of things that are from the coming down from the federal level that are really going to affect our quality of life. It's environment, it's health care, it's education. We've slashed the funding for education by $10.8 billion, or the federal government wants to do that. Our Medicaid waivers are at risk for mass health, and we have slashed the budgets at the federal level for the Environmental Protection Agency. So we are going to have to focus on those 3 areas, I believe, in the next year to ensure that our water stays clean, our environment is good, we can fund education, and we keep our high standards of education, and we don't privatize education, and we're going to have to tackle the health care issue. I would very much follow the model that when I was the chief of staff for the senator that we worked on together, and that is we had office hours in each town every month. We came to selectmen's meetings across the district, especially when we were asked. We worked with the town managers and the mayor in each town, and I think I would do one thing more. I think I would use technology as a way to further engage with people in the community. We have a fabulous website that allows us to interact, and one of the things that we've been looking at is setting up different accounts so that people in Billerica could just send us a message or tell us something that they were thinking about, or asking us to issue to solve a problem, and we can look at that every day and ensure that we continue our communications.
Thank you, Cindy. Sean?
Great. Great question. There's a lot of serious problems facing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. A lot of the matters coming down from Washington are going to force us, and we should be bold and move Massachusetts forward and be bold leaders. I've spent the past 9 years as a legislator building coalitions around important issues, whether it be public transportation, the environment, criminal justice reform, you name it. But certainly, since you just asked which one priority I would champion the next year, it has to be addressing transportation and dealing with the $5.3 billion debt. Certainly I have more priorities, but you asked for one, so that is my one answer of one of the main things I'm certainly going to work on, and certainly that is included with helping the RTAs become better funded than they currently are. I'm going to use the mold that I do now as your state senator, and that is, this is my full-time job, and I am the voice of the people in my district, and I will be here all the time, working with members of the Board of Selectmen, working with members of the school committee, working with members of town meeting, working with town managers, being here in the community more than once or twice a week, but being here whenever I possibly can. Every constituent of mine in Arlington has my cell phone number. Every constituent in Billerica will have my cell phone number, and I will work extremely hard to be responsive, but also be able to pass legislation. As a legislator now, I know I can hit the ground running, and I'm so looking forward to representing you and the great people of this town.
Marianne?
Thanks for the question. First of all, I would prioritize the fair share amendment. That's the thing that's moving right now. We will have to be prepared, but we don't know yet what's going to happen, what's going to come down from Washington. We do know that there is no support for climate change, that there are threats to our health care and to public education. So we have to be ready for that as well. I've heard people saying they're going to hit the ground running, and that's just not relevant. That's not how it works. I mean, you want to do. These are long-term policy decisions that we're talking about, and that we're struggling with. And so you don't just kind of parachute in and start taking action. Pow, pow, pow. You have to really listen and be in the district and hear what's happening. So I would put my office in the heart of the district so that I'm able to access all ends of the district. Definitely use of technology, but I'm not going to decide everything about that piece. I want to hear how you want to be communicated with. We have such a range of options with technology today, not all text-driven. Some of it is voice-driven, some of it can be visually driven, and I think that will be the way that we make smart decisions about how we communicate with each other going forward, because communication is going to be very important from now going forward, and I would hope to have that opportunity as your state senator.
Thank you. What we're going to do now is enter the final stage of the forum this evening, whereby the candidates will be giving a 2-minute closing statement. The order in which they will go was determined prior to, and the order will be Sean will go first, then Cindy, then Marianne. So Sean, 2 minutes.
The voters of Billerica and in the 4th Middlesex District have an important choice, and I believe a profound one. As the only candidate in this race with direct legislative experience of working on legislation, writing it, filing it, and getting it passed personally, I know that I can hit the ground running as your state senator. The relationships I have built on Beacon Hill and the experiences I have in being a legislator with other legislators and organizations around the state will allow me to represent the hardworking people of Billerica. I want to continue Senator Donnelly's legacy and build on it. I know with my 9 years of experience on Beacon Hill, and because of my record of accomplishment, I will be able to do so. And I hope to earn your vote on June 27th. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sean. Cindy?
Thank you. State government has never been more important. As the feds roll back protections and funding, this will affect the quality of life for all of us here in the 4th Middlesex and in Massachusetts. We must hold the line to ensure that we don't go backwards, that we protect our environment, our education system, our health care. We all care about these things, and we can do something about it. I bring decades of solving problems in the public sector, in the private sector, as a parent who raised 3 children here, as a community volunteer and activist for 37 years. After 9 years of working in this district, I have an understanding of the issues that face each of our 5 communities, and I will help solve those problems. When we talk about Senator Donnelly's legacy, one of the reasons why I am running here is because I helped create that legacy, and I want to continue to do that work that we have done together. I also bring an enormous drive to fight for all of you and what you care about, and I want to represent you. I have a proven track record of getting results. I care very much about this district and the state of Massachusetts, and I hope I can work with you, and I hope I can earn your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Mary Ann?
Thank you, and thank you for this forum. I'm running for state senator because I'm a champion for a system that's responsive to the needs of all and our collective vision of a future of shared prosperity. Politics is the art of different thinking, and government is about the decisions that we make together. As a state and community advocate for more than 20 years, I've been speaking up on the issues that matter most to people and families. I've been leading with both passion and respect for the voices, issues, and concerns of my fellow and sister residents across the Commonwealth. Your senator isn't a manager. Your senator is a leader. I can't say enough about good Ken Donnelly. He loved the people he served, and he had so many great ideas, wonderful ideas, and I believed in so many of them, like improved services for veterans and support for hardworking families and speaking up for organized labor as he did. And as we look at the national picture, we're asking, are we prepared for the possible repeal of the Affordable Care Act? Of Roe v. Wade, of putting faith into a federal education system with an utterly unqualified Secretary of Education, and nothing for climate change. So we must prepare to protect from these outrageous and mean proposals, and that means more imagination and perspective and persistence and a fresh perspective, and that's for the long term. Ken Donnelly was one of a kind, and as good as he was, he didn't have all the answers to all of our problems, and I won't either, but I can't do it without you. I ask for your vote on Tuesday, June 27th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidates. I'd now like to call on Chairman of your Democratic Town Committee, Larry Norman, for closing remarks, but before I do so, I just want to thank Larry for the opportunity to be here with you this evening. You have some terrific candidates here. I'm extremely jealous of the people of the 4th Middlesex District. You have a tough choice to make here, but whatever choice you make is going to be a good one. You're very fortunate.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Cindy, Sean, Mary Ann, for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. Tom, Nick, thank you for covering this. Ellen, great job on the stopwatch. Steve, thanks for coming over to moderate for this. As he mentioned, we do have some refreshments out there. I'm sure the candidates won't mind hanging around for a little bit. They'd probably like something to drink also. Also, most importantly, no matter who you support, please remember to vote on primary election day, Tuesday, June 27th. Thank you. Good night.